Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, good evening. I'm very happy to welcome you today to continuation of our collaboration with the Rui Cunha Foundation, and they're hosting another of lectures, public lectures in the series History and Heritage Studies, which is co-organized by Department of History and Heritage, University of St. Joseph and Rui Cunha Foundation. Today we have two speakers from Polytechnic Institute of Tomar in Portugal, Professor Célio Gonçalo Marques and Professora Hermínia Sol. The title of the presentation and the title of their talk is Transdisciplinary Dialogues in the Field of Conservation and Restoration. I will briefly introduce our speakers today. Professor Célio Gonçalo Marques is Professor of the Information and Communication Technologies at the Department of the Polytechnic University of Tomar, Portugal. He's the Director of the Laboratory of Pedagogical Innovation and Distance Learning and the President of the Technical and Scientific Council of IPT's School of Management. He's Integrated Researcher and Director of the Tech and Art Research Unit. Also research collaborator at the Laboratory of Educational Technology, University of Coimbra, and at the Center for Administration and Public Policy, University of Lisbon. His research interests include educational technology, digital innovation, technology applied to heritage, and public policies. Professor Hermínia Sol is an assistant professor at the Polytechnic Institute of Tomar in Portugal, where she teaches English and screenwriting. And she's also a deputy director and researcher at the Center for Technology, Restoration and Arts Enhancement at Tech and Art Research Unit. And she's also a researcher at the Center for English Studies of the University of Lisbon. Hermínia Sol has done research in the fields of travel literature, short fiction, cinema and literature, and women's studies and American studies. The study of narratives, both written and cinematic, has been central to her academic work. Since 2020, she has also been working in the field of memory studies and heritage narratives. She's currently leading the project Paper Trails, which is almost finalized, and the Paper Trails, Post-Industrial Histories, Technical Memories, and Artistic Practices. Again, I welcome our speakers today, and all of you, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Boa tarde. It's a pleasure to be here, to be in Macau, to be in this fantastic place, full of people. We will start by thanking to University of St. Joseph and Rui Cunha Foundation for the opportunity to present some of our research developed at TechniArt, our research center related to heritage. We'll talk here about some of our projects related to conservation and restoration. But first of all, let me tell all of you that we are not conservator restorators. We are here as leaders of this research center, and it is in that role that we are here and talking about these projects. Hermínia, do you want to talk about the agenda for today?
Yes. So again, I also would like to thank the opportunity to be here with a wonderful audience and very different from the ones we usually have access to. So we feel really important. For today, what we would like to talk about is first to introduce the research center and its aims. Then we will talk very briefly about some of the projects that we are developing and that are connected only with restoration and conservation. So they're very diverse. And finally, we will introduce a concept that we are developing and that is indeed majorly the reason of our existence, because we were granted funding to develop that concept. So we are very proud of it. We're nourishing it. Hopefully it will develop and grow. And we will also tell you a little bit of the history behind it and how it can be applied. Nevertheless, just to say that bear with us because we are not experts, so be gentle. And we are the ambassadors, basically. So we studied a lot to be able to do this conference.
So let's start to introduce our research unit. TechniArt is a Portuguese research and development unit undertakes research, both experimental and applied, on the fields of heritage safeguard and enhancement, belonging to the Polytechnic University of Tomar in the center of Portugal. You have there the link for our website if you want to know more things about us. So, our research center is based on the principles of good research practices. As Hermínia said, was assessed for the first time, and we have a good evaluation, a very good. And currently we have 42 integrated researchers and 52 collaborator researchers, plus 1 assistant researcher and 2 PhD grant holders. And we have a variety of fields, and because of these researchers and their fields, we can have people working in conservation, restoration, and ICT applying to heritage, in history, archaeology, tourism, design, literary studies, media communication, and several other fields that have always as the main focus the heritage. So, the TechniArt aims to developing research strategies and methods in 2 main areas: heritage safeguard and heritage promotion and enhancement. In the first line, the idea is to have here, for one side, the part of conservation and restoration and the characterization of and contextualization of heritage assets. In the second line, heritage promotion enhancement, we want also to have the didactics, the technology, the communication that are used to promote the heritage, and also the design and innovation. These lines complement themselves and intersect so that the mission of TechniArt is coherent and ensures that the transfer of knowledge, expertise, and experience accumulated by the researchers of our center. So, as I said, one of the main areas is conservation and restoration, and it is because of that we are here. We will talk about several projects related with conservation and restoration. And here we have several projects related with interventions carry on cultural heritage, not both tangible and intangible, and not only in Portugal, but in several countries, not only also in Europe. And here we have several researchers that are conservators and restorators, and that works in the safeguarding of artistic and cultural heritage. And we have also several professions, several researchers that are related with contextualized and characterization materials and natural heritage. We are talking here about the characterization and contextualization of heritage assets, lines of research like archaeology, history of art, literary studies, chemical and biological characterization of materials. That is very important when we are talking about conservation of monuments. And the idea here is to have all these areas, and so we have here people that are imagine from chemistry that are working in some projects. We have one project that is related with biocides that we are using for the conservation of our monuments. And we also have, in the second line, we have, like I said before, the part of promoting heritage. And here we have people that are from areas like didactics, or people that are from, like me, from computer science, that are using our knowledge to promote the heritage, creating new ways of seeing the heritage, like immersive technologies, like augmented reality, virtual reality, using artificial intelligence, and so on, in this field. We have also our colleagues from more related to didactics, our colleagues also from tourism, our colleagues from filmmaking, our colleagues from design that are here inside this field of research. And the second line is about design and innovation. And here we have several colleagues that are related with design, but also about the innovation. And here includes one of the things that we'll talk here. It's about the creative component. How to use this creative component in the conservation and restoration is what we'll talk about, of the concept that will be also the second part of this intervention. And here we have also other aspects that are related with this line, that are about technological, social, economic, and cultural aspects that we have also here. And so for them, we have also several people working on this field. This was just a brief introduction of our research center, so you understand better what are our projects. Now, at the moment, we have 15 projects working. Mm-hmm. Some of them are finishing, and we are launching another call of internal projects. And these projects are internal projects. We also are working in other international projects. And we'll talk here about internal projects that are related with conservation and restoration. That is the idea. And we have here 5 examples of that. So then we can introduce the concept of creative conservation. And as I said before, we had an assessment from our Foundation for Science and Technology, and with that assessment, we allow our researchers to have their projects, and these projects always have stakeholders from the community. Here we have a museum. With the project that we'll talk, the first project that we'll talk about, but there are other projects, and always have or association, museums, local government, companies, because, like I said, it's not the research we have here. Also, it's experimental, it's applied, and the idea is also work with the community. And the first project that we have here that it's related with conservation is restoration. They call it Murarte. For the Portuguese people, it's more easy to pronounce. And what we have here, it's this first one. It aims to document the Riachos murals, and these murals is a village in the center of Portugal, near Torres Novas. I don't know if the Portuguese people that are here know this village, Riachos. No, Torres Novas. At least when you go in a highway, we see the plates. So it's a small village, and in 2012, in a festival, to bless
the cattle.
It's a religious festival, and they start to create these murals. And it was between the people, the local association, and it's a product of the region. And it's heritage. And the problem is when they start to create these murals, they didn't think about the conservation of it. So when this project starts, was to first of all to document these murals, but at the same time to create here. I think we have it here. To present guidelines that allow them to know, to study first the places where they will create the materials. So after that, they are prepared. They are better prepared to create the murals, and after that also to preserve it. Because, as you know, the murals are outside and we have lots of problems with rain and other situations. So here was the first was document all the murals, to monitorize it, and in the end the idea was also to create guidelines for the future murals, because these are the story. All these murals show the story of this village, showed heritage, and were made by, like I said, by the population and by the local association, and show what was Riachos also in the past. And in 2 years, they document all these murals, they study, and they create, as they call, a mural toolkit, which will present guidelines to follow the process of creating murals. And this tool can be not only utilized by used by this community, but also can be used for other communities that have the same problem. And also they create like a protocol for monitoring and documenting the conservation status of that murals. And now they also are using that information to preserve it. This is one example of what we are doing with conservation and restoration in our research center. There are here, let me show, some publications. We are also, as we said, a research center that have funding from the government. And one of the things that it's very important that the results are published and everyone have access to it. So we have here several publications that you can also see and have more information about this project. In the website of this project, we also can see several videos and other information, interesting information about the project. So, I don't know if you want to...
I was going to volunteer.
Yes, just to change a little bit.
So this is another project in the domain of industrial heritage. And this is, as you can see, like an obsolete structure that is no longer in operation for the main reason why it was created. So it used to be a company that produced fabrics, so no longer, but it belongs to the municipality. And because they want to somehow preserve the estate and they needed help with that, a couple of researchers from the research group volunteered to take this and use it as their own project. With that in mind, they also created some results. If you don't mind, Célia, just move on to the next slide. Okay, thanks. So these were some of the results that were achieved. Of course, they cannot take hold of the factory, of course, and this is, step-by-step process. but at least the content of the factory is now cataloged. They know what exists. Because many of the things, if they are abandoned, they tend to disappear. So this is one way to have an idea of what the content was and have an inventory, if you like. And also has, we will explain a little bit further on, the creative conservation. It's also used as a test to exercise this new methodology. Because when you create something, you have to write about it, theorize it, and then have it validated by your peers. So this is, and some of these projects have that intention in mind, which is to use the project as a test, a laboratory, and then write about it and have it validated by the peers. So this is one, it's very elastic, let's say. You can apply this methodology to several stances of conservation. It doesn't have to be only buildings. It can be objects, or it can be even music, as we will see in a while.
Individual also can see some objects from this project.
Mm-hmm. So also some of the publications already available, resulting from this project in particular.
Okay, I can talk a little bit of this.
Okay,
and then
like.
talk about the others. So in our institution, we had a bachelor that were related with technology and graphic arts. Now we have the same bachelor, but with a different name. But we have a very interesting heritage related to this bachelor that also related to that was originated by the Imprensa Nacional Casa da Moeda, where they print money in Portugal. And we have some of these heritage from there that we cannot see here, but we have more than this photo shows some of that heritage, but we have more. The idea here is to preserve it and to show it to the community, because we have it in our institution and we know that it's very valuable. And this group try also with conservator and restorator, with people also from the field of design, and people that are working on this on typography to create this this project. And the first thing was the collection needs to be inventoried by our researchers, organized, and then they are doing that there. Imagine in the past to write something, or just to put a bold or something, you need to try to find the correct pieces, the correct size, and so on, and change in the machine. They don't have Microsoft Word or Excel. So all the things are there, and was a long time to catalogize everything. And after that, we'll have a big exhibition of that products in one of our spaces in our institution. And yes, also several publications about that. I didn't talk yet, but several students are involved also in this project. One of the master theses of the in the other project was made inside the project, and was not from our university, was from Nova University of Lisbon, and is interesting because our students are working also in these projects. And now art in between. You talk about music.
Yep. So this is the most avant-garde project that we have going on at the moment, and is being developed by our postdoctoral full-time researcher. And this is happening because she's a conservator and restorator, but she's also a musician. So she has a background in music. She's a pianist, and she is very much interested in understanding how new forms of music, let's say electronic music, can be preserved. And this was a project that when she came to us, I must admit that I had trouble following what she was talking about.
Not only you.
Not only several, but we just believed in her because she was so passionate about it that we said, let her work. And indeed, she is completely focused on doing this, and she has published extensively about this idea of hers. So the idea, as far as I could understand, is as follows. With the emergence of new forms of music, especially electronic music, partitures, in some cases, do not exist. So the composers, the musicians, they rely very much on the tools, on the different, let's say, equipments that they use to produce their music. So if one of the, let's say, synthesizers just becomes obsolete, that is a problem. How are we going to preserve? He or she will no longer be able to use that equipment in a future concert or presentation. Right? So what she's developing is also a new methodology, along with composers, along with performers, in finding out what those performers are doing themselves to preserve their legacy as musicians. So that's her goal. So in the methodology she's developing for the preservation of something that is ephemeral if nothing is done. Having said that, it's also visible from the work she's doing that sometimes it's just not possible to preserve everything. Some of the things are just not, we cannot store everything. It's impossible. So we have to make a selection of what is to be kept in store and what we just have to let go. Otherwise, there would be no room on Earth to store everything and keep on piling on new things as well. So this is her goal. And
there are another concepts like big data and so on, but it's more related with ICT. I will not talk about that.
Exactly.
But I think everybody knows that in the past we have something called disks, and we have our hard drives now, but in the future only will be use the cloud and so on. So the things are changing, and this also is related with that.
Oh, and the reason why we chose this specific two photos to illustrate these slides, it's because Miguel Asguime is one of the composers that she's studying and collaborates very much to develop her methodology. And he's a performer, and he uses either words, he uses video, music, lights, everything. So all of that, all that combination allows for the emergence of the performance that, and they're always different. That's also the situation, that they're always different because something may happen in the meantime. So they will have to adjust to the room, to everything is going to influence the ultimate performance of the artist. So these are some of the results that she has been, besides, of course, the publications. She has been interviewing several artists in different domains, but all related to music. And she's also has been contributing a lot to the concept of creative conservation. She's also one of the masterminds behind this specific methodology that she also applies to this specific case with music, electronic music, and avant-garde movements. That's it.
And all of you can find these videocasts in website. You have the website of TechniArt in the first slides, and if you go to website, you have all the projects, and you can click on this project and have that information.
She has her own website as well.
Each
available.
project have one website with that information.
And there's a spelling mistake I just spotted. It's art in between, but
Okay.
she got it right. It was us while transcribing it that
was. Okay. And yeah, the publications.
just related to this specific project.
Yes. And now I think Herminia wants to talk about this project. I don't know why.
So this is the project I'm about to finish and that I led for 2 years. Mostly the reason why I got involved was because there was no one else available. And I took the job that no one wanted. So I started distributing roles, and then I had no role for myself. So I said, what am I going to do? And there was one of my colleagues that his job was to be the director of a documentary film that we were going to do about the project, documenting several steps of the project, what we wanted. The project is about a compound of paper factories that is no longer operating as such. So they were mostly obsolete structures with, I wouldn't say empty, because some of them still have the remains of what was there before. And we, along with an Italian colleague, thought, because she had had an experience before, maybe we can do call the attention of the local community, local entrepreneurs, or national entrepreneurs that would be interested in giving a new life to these buildings, because they're well located, and if they were, let's say, rehabilitated, they would be they could be useful for other ideas.
Just to add an information, these factories are in the region of Tomar because they are very important in the past for our city.
Exactly. So one of them, this one in particular, Companhia de Papel do Prado, closed just in 2017. So it's very recent. And for some people that work there, still a very traumatic moment that they lost their job and they still look at the factory as this used to happen and so on. So we decided to do the documentary and talk to most people involved, not only the workers, but also the administrators, also the former employers, and so on, even the person responsible for the finance. So we started talking, and there was a really good environment that was created. So we went, it was very hot while we were doing this. We were outside, but people, you know, with a certain age, and they tagged along with us. And it was hard, but they tagged along with us, and it was a lot of fun to do. And because I had no role, I decided, okay, I'll take care of the sound, and I'll take care of the production of the documentary. So I was the producer and organized everything around the documentary, along with other components of the project. So the idea was to involve as many people as possible, to create a document that somehow represented as faithful as possible the memories of the people, how they still look at those places, and what can be done, what can be done with them now. And it was also a way to say, listen, it's never going to be a paper factory again. Let go. But it can be something else. And indeed, it seems that that is going to happen. I'm not going to say that it was because of the project, but it was really a set of circumstances that happened throughout these 2 years that led to that possibility. And as a result, we were able to combine several people and even organize an event that was not planned in our initial structure, in our initial plan, which was one of the companies that bought one of the factories contacted us and said, would you like to do something with us? So they opened the factory that had been closed for several years, the factory where your father worked. So you went to the factory also after several years, so they opened so everyone could go to the factory. And the factory for one day was used for a creative moment. It was a cultural event that happened, so we had a performer and we also had a video screening. And the idea was also for the present owners to test that space if it could be used, because it's a company that buys obsolete structures and gives them a new life. And it's all tends to be on the creative side. So it can be something similar to those time-out markets that are now so popular all over Europe, but it can be something else as well. It can be a co-work space and so on. So they wanted to test to see how people would respond if they used the space for an artistic installation, how they would react. So for one day, it was reused for an artistic purpose, that specific space.
Fantastic, because as Amelia said, it's a structure that's obsolete, and they create all the facilities so we can go there and see a movie inside the factory, and see also a performer. A performer there was amazing, and yes, we had lots of people going there. Some of them or work there or have a family that work there just to see again the factory.
So they had a lot of memories. Some of them, when they were children, they used to go with their parents, so they wanted to see. They were very curious. And the safety conditions were organized so that nothing, because it's dangerous to be in a place like this.
They'll put some facilities for us.
But everything was organized so that it was safe to be there during that day.
I think,
And
I don't know if you...
Okay.
Okay. And the results also?
Yeah, so the results, this was the idea, to create a space to get people from academia, from the companies, from local community to talk and to help organize a new life. On this day, this was a field trip that was organized in a symposium, and those people there, they're really a mixed. So we opened the doors and everyone could come to the symposium, and we had the owners of that factory. This is also a former factory, but it's ruins. It's a ruin, but it's a beautiful ruin. So they opened the gates. We also went there with our guests. So we had architects, we had people from academia and the owners and the local community all talking to each other. And one of the owners was actually talking to an architect, trying to find out how to solve the problem. What can we do with this? So it was also a fantastic day.
And I remember that they found also interesting things for the conservation and restoration in the factories. It was very interesting for all. And they can find, talking with each other, find some solutions for the problem, especially the owners.
Yes, those were the most interesting.
In that. And some publications.
Some publications. There's more to come, but it's in a volume, so we didn't put it because it's not done yet.
And you want to talk about the movie, and we are trying to have
some... yes, the movie is it's done, but we also, when we organized it, it sort of gained a life of its own, and after a while we decided to do it really well and possibly put it in a competition in a documentary film festival. So it's now being translated into English, and in a week or so, we will be able to submit it to festivals. We'll see.
And there was an exhibition in Tomar in our Cine Teatro.
Yes, and our local cinema.
Local cinema, and was full of people. And
yes, that's true.
People that work there, and we saw in the eyes They are shining when they are looking, not only because some of them were actors.
Were in the film. So they brought the whole family.
Family was amazing.
And it was amazing
yeah.
because they couldn't believe it. And then we did a second screening, and it was even more people because then they said to other people, and they all came. So
and
it was
in
really
the right
good.
moment because we know some of them are old and we don't know what will happen in the future. So, and now, I think
this is the moment everyone has been waiting for.
About the concept of, because we talk here about conservation and restoration. I think everybody knows what we are talking about. We talk about several projects related with that. And we already introduced this concept that now Hermínia will talk a little bit. I don't know if you want to talk first a little bit.
It would probably be best if one of the brains behind the concept did the talking himself. So we have a small video, it's a 5-minute video, in which really the person, the first person to start working on this, explains how the concept came about, how it happened, and then I can talk a little bit more about it. But if it's possible...
Yeah. We have a group of researchers working in this concept. One of them is Ricardo Triens. And Ricardo, maybe some of you know Ricardo. If people are working in conservation and restoration, know him for sure. And we have now a team that's working in this concept in several projects.
Dos objetos inúteis.
If you can put in the beginning, please. Thank you so much.
Conservação criativa é uma maneira de pensar sobre a utilidade dos objetos inúteis. Por outras palavras, aquilo que de alguma forma, no processo de evolução das cidades, por exemplo, as suas transformações do ponto de vista urbano, muitas vezes das situações de mudanças do tecido económico de uma determinada região, por exemplo, constantemente há alterações significativas do ponto de vista do património, do ponto de vista social, do ponto de vista económico, que vão deixando para trás alguns desses testemunhos, alguns desses registros, algumas dessas evidências que em determinados momentos são uma marca muito identitária desses locais, eu digo cidades, mas podem ser outros locais mais pequenos, como vilas ou aldeias, mas onde há um traço de personalidade muito forte agarrado a essas manifestações, a esses objetos, muitas vezes. E é isso que, de alguma forma, o projeto Conservação Criativa quer trazer. De alguma forma, é esta criatividade que não está associada propriamente à ideia de fazer arte, não é esse o conceito. Aqui a criatividade está associada à ideia de inovação. Encontrar uma solução diferente para um problema que ainda não tinha sido colocado, ou pelo menos com esta perspectiva. Ora, com esta dinâmica que nós tentamos aqui introduzir, criámos vários, além deste primeiro projeto, inserido numa exposição que se intitulou Edifícios e Vestígios, em 2012, em Guimarães, Capital Europeia da Cultura. Depois, mais tarde, teve outros 2 projetos, também com o foco aqui no Instituto Politécnico de Tomar, e que se centraram em âmbitos diferentes. Um também de âmbito industrial, que teve a ver com a fábrica de fiação de Tomar, e com parte desse espólio que foi abandonado no entorno da fábrica, que tinha a ver com os cartões de ponto, e que quisemos também, através desse registro, desses cartões, fizemos todo o processo que na conservação e restauro gostamos de fazer, e que é a nossa prática de tentar preservar o melhor possível, minimizar o impacto da degradação sobre esses bens. São documentos em papel, com registro, pintados com tinta da máquina de escrever, com alguns registros manuais, com alguns registros a lápis, por exemplo. Fizemos todo esse processo da sua limpeza, da sua estabilização, do seu processo de identificação e inventário, e depois foram encapsulados de modo a que pudessem ser também manipulados, porque esse era o objetivo. E é isso que dizemos, são objetos, digamos assim, inúteis, mas que hoje em dia podem ter uma utilidade na forma como comunicam o património, como comunicam esse valor identitário de uma determinada comunidade. Com o projeto que se seguiu, em que envolveu uma coleção de azulejos, que nós intitulamos de figura avulsa. Reconstituímos um fragmento de um azulejo que vinha nessa coleção, com aquele desenho de uma flor, e que fizemos um painel com cerca de 3 metros de lado. No fundo é um mosaico de pequenos fragmentos de azulejo, segundo os quais respeitamos a forma como nos chegaram, devido à forma incorreta como foram levantados, o facto de não terem sido identificados, catalogados, não ter sido sequer feito um trabalho por conservadores restauradores. Conseguimos de alguma forma comunicar o valor dos azulejos, o valor da azulejaria, através da criação deste painel. E é desta forma que se tenta, digamos assim, fixar este projeto, e isso depois pode voltar a fazer com que esses bens, com que esses objetos tenham um novo olhar, uma nova interpretação e de alguma forma possam ter um significado que é útil para as populações, que é útil para o património, que no fundo é isso que nós trabalhamos, para a preservação do património cultural.
Thank you.
Sure. So again, it started in 12, 12. That's 2012.
12.
Sorry, 12. Maybe the
That's a
tiles.
long way.
And it first started with an environment of industrial heritage. They were just studying the materials, and then they thought there's potential here. We can do something different. Now, having said this, and it all seems very glamorous and really nice, but even within IPT, there's different points of view. So this is not unanimous. It's not an idea. It's not a methodology that everyone thinks, so it's great. And one of the reasons has to do with the fact that the most conservative side of conservators tends to regard this methodology as too interventive in the original work of the person who creates, who produces the work of art or the building or so on. And it somehow violates a code, a deontological code that all conservators have to follow. Now, what this group, and that's why it needs validation. Now, what this group has been doing is to create a theoretical ground for this methodology and to explain that indeed all paradigms change over time. So otherwise, we would be stuck in a moment in time. So they have been developing that theoretical background and showing evidence that the idea that the conservator has no interference in terms of creativity in the work in which it is involved, it's not true. So most conservators usually leave a mark. They cannot do their work without a certain amount of creativity. So this is not new. It didn't have a name. But having said this, if you Google creative conservation, most likely you will find this concept applied to environmental studies. It's mostly what you will find, right? So, but that's not the creative conservation that we are concerned about. So this is more of a tangible outcome. So the idea here was to show evidence that creativity can be used for something that basically there's no hope. So it's a waste, but you can do something. You can still preserve either collective memory that may be attached to a certain object that is very, it's impossible to put it together as it was, but maybe you can do something with it and keep part of it that will remain. And so it's not about violating anything, because if you don't use it that way, it's going to go to waste. That's it. So either you preserve it in a different way, in a creative way, or it goes to waste. It's also a way to store more things, to preserve more things, basically. Okay, use it to the fullest. Nevertheless, this indeed causes several problems, either theoretical within the group. So you have basically two groups of people within conservation and restoration. One is pro, the other one is against. So debate is needed. Debate is needed. Just to me, being from the literary studies, I can always find intersections with my field of interest. And when I was talking to the researchers and they were explaining to me what this was all about, immediately it came to my mind the role of the translator. So if you're a translator, you're bound to be dealing with someone else's work, dealing with someone else's words, and obviously you're going to change something. You cannot be 100% faithful to what the person has written. So you're interfering with someone else's work. But your work is acknowledged. So you have this book and then translation by. So that person's work is acknowledged. In terms of the conservators, their role in the recreation or rehabilitation of a piece is completely invisible. It's almost as if they didn't exist. So they do the work and their work is not acknowledged. So in a way, this methodology also wants to go against it. Why my work, if I'm doing something that it's allowing for something to keep on going, to last more time, throughout time, why do I have to be invisible? So it's also a way to, I have a job and I want to be acknowledged for the job that I want to do, or the job that I'm doing. I think everyone, it's a claim that it's not wrong. So that's also part of the methodology. It's just acknowledging the work of someone and not making it invisible. So, Sally, could you go to the next
just
slide?
Just say that you can find this piece on our university tomorrow.
Oh, that's right. Mm-hmm. And you saw it. So this doesn't go without challenges, and these are some of the challenges that are being put forward by this group of researchers. That they acknowledge they exist, but they call for action and mostly debate in both parts. So the pro and the against group. So what is mostly the obstacles that this type of methodology is facing?
Challenges.
Or challenges, yes, challenges. First, the codes will have to be revised. The code of ethics will have to be revised. And also education programs in which students are taught immediately to become invisible workers also has to change, okay? So they have a role to fulfill, and there's nothing wrong with acknowledging it. So the practices will also have to be revised. And in terms of other actions that need urgency is to establish or not further limits within creative conservation. Because it's not just about, oh, I want to be creative. No, there's boundaries, there are limits, there has to be rules, even for how creative you can be. Mm-hmm. Define when and who may apply it. So this may not be open to everyone. Otherwise, we could have a problem like those people who think they're restorators and decide to paint the head of a saint, and then we have, something out of a horror film that happens. So there has to be boundaries. And again, that's why the education programs need to be readapted so that they can match the demands of a methodology like this. And then also understand in which ways creative conservation interplays with the accessioning policies and practices. How disturb it? Because it's about disruption as well. So let's see how the policies and practices need to be readjusted, let's say, to comply with these new demands. Also, see if identify, evaluate, and compare the benefits of creative conservation. This may not be useful, this kind of approach may not be useful for all situations, but some, yes. So let's also evaluate in which ones they would function better. And finally, to question how creative conservation is connected with matters of taste, subjectivity, cultural differences, and political agendas, because they are all connected as well. So as a person, of course, I'm going to be subjective regarding what I'm going to do, the choices that I make. But I'm also under the influence of the culture in which I was born, in which I was raised, and that somehow molded me. And of course, political agendas may also play a role in it as well. As we all know, in artistic matters, in all matters in life, right? So this also is a concern to bear in mind when dealing with this new methodology. So it can be great, but of course it needs, it's not something that is an individual state of mind or something that someone decides. No, there has to be rules, and that's why the methodology is what we are working on. Not we, the two of us, but that group, our researchers are doing. So this is the something that we would like to share with you. And when I spoke to Dennis, he said, why don't you put that in the title? And I said, because it hasn't been validated yet. So we didn't want to boast something that still needs, still requires further validation from the peers of conservation peers. And that's the reason. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the guiltiest from Dennis was Dennis. The guilty one. No, the idea is, first thing is talk about our projects and what we are doing. And yes, we introduced this concept and hope that you understand, because as we said, we are not conservative restaurators. We are just two researchers from this research center, but we have the responsibility to be the director and the vice director of it. Thank you for your attention.
Could you
I want
just
to,
a little?
just sorry, because we are on time.
So in case you want to know more about creative conservation, these are the publications that are already available. And the first, where is it?
The first one?
No, it's not the first one. It's the
last one? No.
No, there's no page, but, well, I forgot to put it. There's the last one was presented in a ICOMOS just last week conference.
Is that the second one?
No.
No.
Oh, is it? Yes, it's the second one, exactly. It's the second one. So this was last week. And I was talking to Ricardo on the phone, and he was really happy with the type of the audience and the response from the audience regarding this. So the next stage is an article that is already written, but we also want to find out what's the point of view of our advisory council regarding what they have written, to see if there's something that needs to be perfected, to submit it to a very good conservation and restoration journal, a reputable one. So if that happens, I think we will be able to say, yes, we can now say the words out loud because it has been validated.
And yes.
Yes, now it's over.
It's over.
So much for your brilliant presentation. I think we have some time for questions. I would like to collect some questions.
Yeah, good evening. So first of all, congratulations for this nice concept.
Thank you.
And I think it's an interesting oxymoron to explore. And I guess this is interesting also to, yeah, because I guess I understand that there are lots of ethical concerns also, yeah, this tension between these two, between creativity and conservation. I have a question. I want to come back to the musical. You talk about the music conservation, so I was interested to know if there are, because I understand that this has been done in collaboration with this musician, and so I want to know if there are some kinds of impact or modification of the music of the produced by this musician, considering that you have to maybe to do something that is yeah, that you have to protect and conserve in, you know, for the future the elements of this music, the tapes, etc. So are there any impact or influence on the artistic behavior? Yeah.
I was afraid that question would arise.
Sorry.
As I said, this was the hardest one for me even to understand, to follow what Andrea was trying to accomplish with her project. As far as I know, from what I have read, written by her, most of the ideas, this is a combination of efforts. It's a joint venture. So not only is her giving some tips to the performers, but they are also giving her some tips as well. So she's recording and cataloging what they have already done to preserve their work. And at the same time, she's also finding out new options that can be combined with those that are already in existence and that can be replicated by other artists that are somehow in this field and that require a lot of equipment and differences of place and so on, that basically their performances are, let's say, restrained by the places that are given to them to do the performance. So they have to study it and readapt it constantly. However, should you like to know more, she has a very good article already out and available to read, and where she explains everything, what she knows already.
Because it's an ongoing project, will only finish next year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I mean, I'm a professor at university here in Macau from England. And I edit a journal called Mobilities, published by Taylor and Francis or other things. And so I'm interested in kind of movement and migration and people's kind of, and what was really interesting in some of my other projects that I've done, I've also done stuff on the creative class and artists repopulating areas of industrial cities, particularly spaces like you've just shown. You have a disused factory and artists move into the factory to repopulate it and create a new artistic center, in a sense, not a museum, but to use it to create, because it has nice big windows and it has that architectural space which is more open to interpretation for artists. And I'm just wondering whether any of that has happened in any of these. I mean, I suspect there's quite a lot of rural depopulation going on in Portugal, where people move to cities to look for jobs, and the younger people do not want to really live in small villages in the middle of nowhere because they want their tech and they want, you know, to be part of the, you know, 2023. So I'm more interested in that kind of rural depopulation and maybe the migration. You know, can you say anything about any migration that's gone back into these areas?
While we were doing the documentary, we also interviewed the architect that is going to be responsible for say, rehabilitating that specific spot. And he's working with that company in particular. The history of that company is that basically all the spaces that they have rehabilitated so far, with minor intervention, are in big cities. So that is not a problem because they already have the population they need to occupy those spaces. In the case of Tomar, it's really rural. So it's not even in the city, it's outside of the city. And even though the space is fantastic, it's really a green area with a river and so on, as most paper factories are located next to rivers. They're still doing all the studying regarding the space because they have to create the conditions for people to occupy that space, because otherwise they won't go. So they need all the facilities, they need the supermarkets, they need all the services to be close by, or integrate those services in the facility itself. So that is the study that's being done. But based on the history of that particular company, they tend to be very successful. They don't do things in a rush. So I would say they study a lot, the structure, everything. What they don't want to, they want to give it a new life, but they want, when you enter the space, you must perceive what it was. So they're very careful with it, not to decharacterize it. So they wanted to keep it that way. So it's still an ongoing process. They're very secretive about what is going to emerge out of it. I've been trying to extract information, haven't been very lucky. They just said, you know, soon enough you will know. So obviously they don't trust me. So.
But we have another example in Tomar that is not related with the paper, Moage. It was rehabilitated by the municipality, and there are one space for exhibitions, but also you have a museum inside. We also have facilities for the municipality, and they try to have several things in that space, and it's usually inside, when they have inside the cities. Probably these factories are outside the cities, like Herminia said. It's more difficult because we are in rural areas, but inside the cities we have some examples of that, but most of them for museums. It's true.
But there's another problem that makes a huge difference, is that the example you just gave, there are no financial gains. And this one is a company, of course, they want to get their revenue back. True. So obviously they have to study it in such a way that when they make the space available, of course they're going to get their money's worth because it was a massive investment in that huge space. And that is also part of the problem because it has to be so well studied in a sense that they will regain of course they want to regain the money. It's not...
Just to add in on that one, what I found so interesting about that is that where we find ourselves in Macau nowadays, certainly within the last year and accelerating now, with announcements made in the last several months, you know, Macau can have it both ways. You know, the government has made it mandatory with the 6 gaming concessionaires that they all embrace projects of historical restoration and importance, and it does not necessarily have to make a monetary return because the concessionaires are underwriting it. But to the benefit of it is if they do it properly, some of these historic sites, whether it be the firecracker factory, the shipyard, restoration of Ponte 14, 16, all those areas, if people will come to actually visit it, helps preserve the culture, of the area. The other part that I found interesting of what you were saying, particularly of the paper mill, I worked on a project in the United States which restored part of the Bethlehem Steelworks, which for them, those people's very livelihood depended on that plant. And, and steel making left the United States for the most part. They were without an industry. So I worked on a project that helped restore use to that facility and historic nature of it and turned it into a functional business as well. So I think for Macau, though, there's a lot of relevancy to what you're presenting to our current situation here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to comment?
We saw a beautiful example on Taipei about the fireworks factory that we went also with you. And of course, we don't have money for, we don't receive yeah, so yeah, but it's very interesting because it's a green space. They preserve it. It's so fantastic to go there and to enjoy the space, and also they are preserved.
And it's a green area.
Yeah, a green area also.
So we also saw several examples, even throughout Europe and outside Europe, of industrial spaces that were turned into green areas. And of course, there's no profit to be made in that. However, if we see it in another way, there's a profit to be made because people need green areas and they usually go to those green areas and they do it for the well-being. So instead of spending money at the hospital, and instead of having the government paying for all those expenses at the hospital, if you provide people with a green area, maybe you're making money because you're not spending it at the hospital and with big pharmaceuticals.
Thank you for your presentation. At the beginning, you mentioned mixing new technologies like 3D and VR and these kind of things. And I just wonder if some of the projects you are working on right now, you are using this creative conservation, mixing the concept of augmented reality or 3D, and because it's something that maybe is not destructive, right? Like you can mix both and then keep the good and the, I don't know. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I understand. And we are not using that technologies in the concept of creative conservation. We are using to promote our heritage. We are using 3D. We are using 3D augmented reality and so on, but only to promote it because I think it's when we are talking about this concept, we are using that materials, we are creating something that, as Emilia said, if we don't use it, it's go to it's waste. And so we are trying to do. Of course, we can use it. Imagine you can create like Ricardo did it here, like was a flower. But we can try to have some information with augmented reality to see how it was when was not broken. Or other information about the pieces that were used that. See, where we can use that technologies, but not in the concept, but to complement that concept.
thank you for the sharings. Here's the thing, like, because I study and work related to this field as well. And then I'm quite interested about the last few slides. Like, you mentioned about, like, if you don't keep it, then it's a waste, right? But how do you define it? Like, if it is worth it to keep it? Because honestly, for memory, right? Like this type of thing, maybe for one type of people, they agree about the topic, but not all of them. As Scott just mentioned about the shipyard in Macau as well, like back to the example that you talk about the paper factory, right? Like it happens in the Macau with the same situation as well. Like when we get there, some people will mention like, oh, when I was small, I used to play around here as well. But for the new generation, they got nothing or no memory about the shipyard area as well. But they just get there and then see like, oh, that's something in the past. Yeah. So how do you define it? Thanks.
Well, there has to be some circumstances to define that, because something is valuable depending on the context and depending on the person. So, for example, what Ricardo was showing, for many people would be just a bunch of rubble. So there would be no meaning, nothing interesting there, right? But because he's an expert, he was able to see, no, these are the remains of tiles from the 16th and 17th century. So there's value here, if for nothing else, because of the age. So of course this has to be evaluated by the eyes of experts. For me, it would be just tiles. I wouldn't be able to evaluate, but he knows, because he knows the materials, he knows how to study. And the reason the tiles came to him, and they literally came to him, because the owner of the tiles, he was renovating the house and said, I have all this, okay. And sometimes they see the ceramics department as, I have a lot of rubbish in the house. Maybe they would like to have it. And so he put it in the truck and said, listen, I have this. Do you want this? Do you want this? Is it useful for you? Maybe for tests or something. And Ricardo was saying, this is from the 17th century. So it's all broken, but it's from the 17th century. So he was, and of course there was missing parts. He could not make a mural out of it, because it was really severely damaged, missing parts. It was impossible. But there was a tile that, even though it was severely damaged, he was able to understand what was the design of the tile. And he created a replica, a big replica, with the remains of those tiles. So that's how the concept was applied. So on their own, as they were, it was impossible to do something. But he could create something. But he could create something because he is an expert. Not just myself or Celio decided, I have a free afternoon. Let's see what I can find in store and just renovate.
Let's be creative.
Yeah, let's be creative. So there are rules for this. And even the pieces of tiles that you saw, they were all cleaned. They were all treated so that they could last longer as well.
The work there. Ricardo explained that in the movie.
And there's another detail. If by any chance the former owner decided, actually, I want them all back because they're valuable. That's a possibility. What Ricardo did was, okay, if that happens for some reason, I'll be able to take them all bit by bit and give them back. Restored. So the person still gains.
Like
so
a puzzle.
Even that, yeah, exactly. So even that requires a lot of theoretical work. So it was not just something that, let's just be creative. No, there's a lot of thought going on when deciding what should be rehabilitated? Is it worth it? Is it not? What can we do? So it's a methodology.
Thank you. Any more questions? Well, thank you so much. We're already around 9 o'clock. We also have some drinks, and I would like to thank you, everyone, staying late, and our speakers today, Rui Cunha Foundation, for hosting this lecture. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.